I want to pursue further what we started last week about Yetzias Mitzrayim. So we explained last week briefly the concept that Chassidus explains Yetzias Mitzrayim, that Yetzias Mitzrayim is an ongoing thing. There is another phrase to it. The fact that Yetzias Mitzrayim had to be preceded by the Golus Mitzrayim. Before there could be the Geula, there had to be the Golus. And we know that this Golus was something that was planned way in advance. Even by Avraham Avinu, he was already told that this Golus is going to happen, going to be, and that there is going to be a Geula. And we also know from Chassidus, I'm sure you have learned this, that in order to be able to receive the Torah as a preparation for Matan Torah and Kabbalas HaTorah, there had to be this Golus. And I want to discuss this briefly, and then of course bring it back to ourselves and recognize the similar inyonim that we are experiencing ourselves. You've learned simply from the Chumash that the Golus Mitzrayim was a total Golus. Total means that Eden were subjugated completely. They completely lost any any self-control, so to speak. They had no say over their lives at all. They were subjugated to the point where they were treated like objects. There was no rationale, there was no consideration. And I even mentioned, I think, one time recently, that it was that the Mitzrayim had intentionally devised types of labor for Eden, that it should be Avedas Perach. And Perach means that it's not just heavy work, but Perach means that it shudders a person, it breaks him down. There's nothing left of the person after that. It's not just physical labor. And yet, this is a preparation for Matan Torah. We would think that a more appropriate hachonah for Matan Torah would be if the Yidden would go through a rigorous the educational system. They would learn. As a matter of fact, Eden have been learning. In other words, prior to Mitzrayim, the Shvatim all learned Torah. Yankov Avinu learned in Yeshiva by Shem Yever, and his children also learned, and Eden continued to learn, as it says that when Yankov was going down to Mitzrayim, it says, "Yehuda sholach lefonav Yosef lahoyres lefonav Goishna." So Rashi says over there, lahoyres lefonav, that Yankov, ahead of himself, before entering Mitzrayim, he sent Yehuda to establish a yeshiva, a place to learn. Learning would seem to be a more appropriate hachonah for Matan Torah, for Kabbalas HaTorah, than the Golus. But we know that this is not the case, and the Golus was a necessity for Kabbalas HaTorah. The short answer for this is that anything that one obtains, one gets through his intellectual pursuit, through his learning, is true because of his intellect, because he understands that it's true. And therefore the extent of its presence is dependent on his understanding. It is true because I understand it. Matan Torah was a new phase in the world history, a new phase certainly in the Jewish life. Because we know that before Matan Torah also, they always learned Torah as we mentioned before, but this was a different type of Torah than what we received in Matan Torah. Before Matan Torah, that which was learned was all limited to the degree of human understanding, albeit great human understanding, like the others, but it still was limited to the extent of what a human being can reach. And Matan Torah was a new phase that the Torah was actually given from Hashem himself, given down from above to us. And for this purpose, in order to be able to receive the Torah in that way, there had to be this Golus Mitzrayim. How is Golus Mitzrayim a preparation for this? Up until Golus Mitzrayim, up until that time, Eden also knew of Hashem. This was one of the great principles that Avraham Avinu has established, and Yaakov Avinu had tested his sons in the last moments of his life, and he asked them, do you all agree with me? And they all said, we all agree with you. You only have one thing in mind. Only Hashem Echad. That's what Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad comes from. It's a posuk in the Torah. Well, the Gemara says that when Yaakov called his sons in for the brachas, he suspected that there was something impure, as a shalom in his sons. So he asked, "Are you all with me?" And they all said, "Shema Yisrael." Yisrael, they're referring to Yisrael because Yaakov was called Yisrael. So they all knew about Hashem before. And even when Moshe Rabbeinu came to the Yidden while they were in Golus, and Moshe Rabbeinu came to them and he said that Hashem sent me to you, Eden also believed him. The Hashem sent it, they accepted it. We have to mark the following interesting difference between in Moshe Rabbeinu's debate with Hashem. When Hashem was talking to Moshe Rabbeinu and he should go to Mitzrayim and redeem Eden, so there were many pretexts, many arguments that Moshe Rabbeinu presented. First he said that Eden will not believe me. When he says they won't believe me, he didn't say that they won't believe me, I believe in Hashem. They won't believe me, they'll say, Lo niro elocha Hashem, they will suspect, they'll say, oh, you're inventing this, Hashem never spoke to you. In other words, it wasn't a question whether they believe in Hashem. It was a question whether they would believe him, that Hashem spoke to him. When it came to Parai, what was Parai's argument? Parai didn't ask, prove to me that Hashem spoke to you. Parai said, who is Hashem? I don't know of such thing. So Eden knew Hashem. all the time. But this knowledge was because of their emunah, and also because of their understanding that they knew of Hashem. By Kabbalah, they knew of Hashem. What happened by Yetzias Mitzrayim was, I just said, a new phase in a Jewish national life. What was the new phase? The new phase was that when Eden came out of Mitzrayim, they were not an entity. They were not incapable at all to fend for themselves. They were not a coherent nation. Hashem took them out, and took them out all through a miraculous process. Miraculous process. There was Makas B'chayros, and there was all the Makas before that, and they recognized that Hashem has distinguished them from the Mitzrayim. So that their recognition of their relationship to Hashem, their recognition of the presence of Hashem, was not only due to their understanding and their emunah. It was due to the fact that they felt that Hashem took them into His custody. He carried them. That's why it says later on. It says that the way Eden were led from Mitzrayim to Matan Torah was similar to the way an eagle carries his young. They were carried, they were cuddled. They were actually felt the presence of Hashem just carrying them. This changed fundamentally their cognizance of the presence of Hashem. Whereas before it was something internal, something that they experienced in their intellect, now it becomes an actuality.
How did it come? It just came?
To the miracles. They were carried. It was beyond their understanding what was happening.
But how did they come to the miracles?
Hashem performed miracles for them.
Oh,
just like that. It was not something that they reached to.
They didn't do any initiative of their own?
They didn't do any initiative of their own. The only initiative that prepared them for these miracles, and this was the point, the initiative that prepared them for these miracles and prepared them to the point that they can accept and just give themselves over, was the Golus. If they had not gone through the Golus, if they were not at this lowest ebb that a human being can be, then even while you extend your hand to him, even while you show him your care and so forth, he still recognizes his own independence. He still takes things with his own intellect. At that point, Eden were not judging anything with their own intellect, because they had lost all self-respect. So therefore, and they were picked up miraculously from Mitzrayim, just picked up as a nation, separated, like it says, I'm going to Goy, a nation from the midst of another nation, and taken out. So they had this sense, the recognition, that here, their whole mitzias, their whole presence as a nation, is not rooted in themselves, is not in of themselves. It is something which is granted to them directly by Hashem. And they became Hashem's nation. They did not become a nation that knew Hashem. And this is the big difference between before Matan Torah and after Matan Torah. Before Matan Torah, Eden also knew Hashem. But before that, they were a nation that knew Hashem. And now they became Hashem's nation. And, which means that their whole presence, their whole existence was because Hashem made them, not just because they know of Hashem. This is explained many places in Chassidus, explained in Rabbi Sichas, this principle. This facilitated, this enabled, it made possible the union of Matan Torah. Because they now have been taking, accepting, receiving things from Hashem, not with their own, based on their own intellect, based on their own capacity. Because as a matter of fact, they were not capable of relating to this. But they were receiving things from Hashem as it was given, because they recognize that they are Hashem's nation, they're not an independent entity. That's why they were able to receive the whole Torah. That's why they were able to get to the point, as you know, that Matan Torah depended completely on the statement that Eden made, Nase v'nishma. Again, I'm sure you heard this, that before Matan Torah, Eden said, Nase v'nishma. We will accept, we will do whatever Hashem tells us, and then afterwards we'll understand. What is Nase v'nishma? How does it come Nase v'nishma? It is something which is irrational. How does one say, I'll do and then I'll understand? Because they have been transformed now in being Hashem's nation. If we are Hashem's nation, we'll do whatever He says. And subsequently we'll understand, because we are not relating to Hashem through by virtue of who we are by ourselves. We are Hashem's, and therefore we'll take whatever He gives us. And then we'll understand and use our own intellect to understand. This is what transpired at Matan Torah, at Yetzias Mitzrayim. And this is the explanation, basically, for this severe shuddering and golus. Without this golus, it could never happen. This Inyan is not just a historical fact. This Inyan repeats itself in various phases, in various ways, and every person individually experiences these type of transformations, these types of stages in his life, by virtue of various experiences that he has. We here now, in this time of Jewish history, the big historical factor of today's times is the Baal Tshuva. This is the big transformation that happened in Jewish people. The Jewish people in the last 100 years have gone through tremendous suffering. And each one had its particular effect and particular purpose. I want to just speak about us here. About Tshuva, in the literal sense of the word as we experiencing it, is someone who comes from a different background, not being reared in Jewish tradition, not being reared with a Moida Ani from the cradle, and having been actually reared, having grown up in a totally different environment, with totally different ideas, very far from ideas of Yiddishkeit. And then he comes to recognize, oh, he is Jewish and he has to become Jew and he has to get back into Yiddishkeit. So one asks himself, why? What's the meaning of that? Why do I have to go through all of this? What's the point of being in Eden to a point where they don't know anything about Yiddishkeit? And then start rejuvenating, start a new process. So this question pertains in general, so to speak, if you want to speak objectively. And then, more importantly, each one of us has to understand where we stand and what we stand to gain from this, and where our strength lies, and what we know as a result of our prior experience. The one very profound inyan that has surfaced and been proven as a result of this century-long suffering that Eden had gone through, was to bring out by Eden the sense and recognition that they belong to Hashem and they belong to Torah and belong to the Jewish people, not just because they have been reared by it, and because they appreciate it, because they understand it, because they feel comfortable with it, but simply because they and Yiddishkeit and Hashem is one thing. We know this has been proven in many different ways. I mentioned recently this marvelous phenomenon where in Russia you have 3 or 4 generations of people who were not only not given any kind of exposure to Yiddishkeit, but were prevented, were not allowed to. It was a dangerous thing. Not only was it a dangerous thing, but they were taught the opposite. They were given the prevailing fad, the prevailing attitude was that religion is something to be shunned, religion is something shameful, something that one should stay away from because it's no good, it's dangerous. It's dangerous spiritually and intellectually and so forth. And then, as soon as a Yid had a chance, had any taste of Yiddishkeit, certainly when towards the end of the century, when they had a chance to actually go freely and taste it and try it, they opened their mind and hearts immediately to it, even though they were total strangers to it. And they had to give up many things that they were used to. And yet, they took it completely with full heart. It wasn't even a challenge.
Don't you think it's a big exaggeration to say?
I'm sorry?
Would you say that it's an exaggeration to say that? I would say most of the Jews that came out of Russia, you could say that they're very apprehensive towards religion still, and
they're apprehensive.
The majority of the people that actually observe something or even feel connection to it at this point.
The
minority of the Jews that came out of Russia, I
right.
would say that they're the ones that feel any connection to Judaism. The majority don't even know. Maybe Yom Kippur once a year they go, but other than that they have no.
Right. So, along with that, those Jews that are still distant there are two factors. They were not exposed to it, and they are afraid to be exposed to it because they were taught that it's something not rational, not good. I think I mentioned to you, I had personal experience with a Yidden. This was a Russian Jew, and he was working over there in this company that I was involved. And I tried to talk to him about feeling about something, and he was very fine, he was very close with me, but no, this is not for me. This is not for me. And I couldn't understand why he's so defensive about it, like he's protective. No, I can't touch it. And I was with him several years. Over the years, we had a lot of conversations, and then finally it got clear to me. He was, I hate to mention this, he was telling me, one time he sat down, he says, we were talking about Hashem, he says, is it really true? Is he really for real? Is that really true? So I said, of course. So he says, I was in a place in Russia where they said that he was there. True. So I realized what he's talking about. He thought that we are talking about the negotiation thing.
Except he was in a place with
Where he was there, meaning the Yoshke.
what place is that?
Or whatever it is, someplace in the... So I said to him, in other words, he was so turned off because he didn't know that there was a different thing. The only thing he heard about was the Goyish beliefs. And he was turned off from that. And he's afraid to touch it because he thinks that we are talking about the same thing. But if there is a clear exposure, they grab it. Because that's what I saw. If there is a clear exposure, there was almost no resistance.
What's the any Jew?
What?
What's the any Jew? There's a clear exposure. Any Jew will grab onto it. The question is, how do you get to the clear?
Yeah.
exposure?
Well, yeah. But my point is this. Why is this? That's a valid question. My point is for our purposes. What does this show, and what did this all bring out? It all brings out that it's the same union that was brought out after Golus Mitzrayim. That this brought out and revealed by Yidden, because let's face it, Yidden who live, now that we are a Baalei Tshuva, or even people who were reared in Yiddishkeit from the cradle on, they have all kinds of nisyonos. It becomes difficult. Sometimes it becomes difficult to do a mitzvah. Sometimes there are all kinds of different nisyonos that a person has. Because when it comes to understanding Yiddishkeit with your seichel, then there is a difficulty. Because you don't really understand. You don't understand what kashrus is, you don't understand what tefillin is, you don't understand even what Shabbos is, and therefore you have to really work on yourself to break through it and to fight the nisayon. But when it comes to the principle that I am a Yid and therefore I'm connected to Yiddishkeit, there is no nisayon there. then you're ready to give up everything you had, change your life over completely, and get into a new phase of life completely. Why? Because this principle, this inyan that you're a Yid, this is what we got from Matan Torah on, and this reveals itself in every generation, that the inyan that we are a Yid, the inyan that I'm connected to Yiddishkeit, is not dependent on my intellect. It's not because I believe in it, because I understand it. It is, as I said before, it's not that I know Hashem, but I belong to Hashem to begin with. That's what I belong to. And therefore, there is no resistance to it. That's what I belong. That's my definition. That's my identity. This is something which, as I said, has borne out, has been proven in the Russian Jewry, in the Russian experience. Then coming back to the free America, in America there was also a complete submerge of Yiddishkeit. And again, but the moment that they recognize that they're missing, that they're missing the principle of who they are, the American Jewry also woke up completely and is coming back to Yiddishkeit in droves. Again, because this principle has been touched. It's not just what I understand, it's not just what I feel, it is who I am. And when it comes to who I am, then there is no question. Then I belong to Hashem to begin with. The Rambam expresses this in very clear and simple terms. Rambam says that even when a Yid says, I don't want to do a mitzvah, this is a superficial thing. Rambam Halach. It's a superficial thing. Internally, he doesn't really mean it. What does it mean? He doesn't really mean it. He says so. So the Rambam says, because internally, every Yid wants to be part of the Jewish nation. He never wants to separate and break away. What's the Jewish nation? The Jewish nation is defined at Matan Torah, that the Jewish nation is the Hashem's nation. Not the nation that knows of Hashem, but the nation that belongs to Hashem. And because it belongs to Hashem, so therefore it's impossible for him to want anything else. Principally, this whole discussion is in order to discuss us over here. Here, each one has their challenges. And we discussed many times. One of the difficulties that one contemplates and thinks to himself, I'm coming into a new phase of a new way of life completely. That was to which I didn't grow up with this. And it's not just a question that I didn't grow up with this, but taking it from bottom up. The first question that a person says is, look, for 20 years or 25 years, I was a successful, whatever, mathematician, and I was at the top of my field. I'm coming into this, and I'm on the bottom. Till now, I was highly respected in my group because I knew the ways of that life. And now I'm coming here, and I'm on the bottom. I'm starting from scratch. I come into shul, I hardly know what's going on. So he feels like a stranger in his own home. This is the most obvious aspect. The other is even in terms of what we learn. Like last week, Friday, I wanted to expose you a little bit to Digduk, to Lashon Kodesh, to certain rules of the grammar of Lashon Kodesh, and even though everybody is happy to learn whatever is given, but there was a lot of feeling of bitterness. There's so much to know. I don't know anything. How am I ever going to reach some kind of an even status that I really belong there? There's so much to know. It's impossible. You get disappointed, you get discouraged. So, this is where I'm coming from. I want that we should all understand and bear this in mind at all times, that what we are doing here, what we are learning, is definitely, to develop our knowledge and our feelings, and to get an understanding of Yiddishkeit, and to solidify it and so forth. But the principle of Yetzias Mitzrayim, the principle of breaking away from a state of nothingness and to coming to a state of being with Hashem, this principle is the most significant in the Jewish life. Like I pointed out, that Yetzias Mitzrayim, what was the hachona for Matan Torah? The hachona for Matan Torah was not going through school. It was not going through an educational system. The hachona to Matan Torah was that Eden came to the realization that they are Hashem's nation. They don't have any separate ideas, any separate mitzvahs. That's the hachona of Matan Torah. And this is how they received the Torah. This principle is very important for our success over here. Because when we begin to judge our success, our accomplishments here, on the basis of how much I learned, you know that there is Gemara to learn an infinite amount, and there is Sforim an infinite amount, whether it's Gemara, whether it's Mishnayos, whether it's Tanakh, whether it's Digduk, whether it's Jewish history, is an infinite amount to learn. And even those who learn a whole lifetime cannot really aspire to know it all. That's not what defines Yiddishkeit. And this is not what gives us our status. Our happiness and our status comes from this, and our encouragement in doing everything comes from this principal knowledge. We are not just pursuing a path for knowledge and a path for accomplishment. We're pursuing to ingrain in ourselves and to recognize in our lives who we are. I remember, approximately a year ago, I started talking about this Indian also. It's all on the archives. This is the principal source of encouragement. This is what has to wake us up in the morning, who we are. Because as a matter of fact, Yidden said, Nasa v'nishma. What does Nasa v'nishma mean? We will do and then we will learn. That means when we come to learn, the learning itself is already, we're doing it as a mitzvah. It isn't that we learn in order to know who we are. We learn because it's a mitzvah to learn. But prior to doing a mitzvah, we already know that we want to do a mitzvah. In learning Torah, because that Torah, every aspect of Torah, is Hashem's Chokhmah. It's not human Chokhmah. It's not human wisdom. It is prepared and presented in simple terms, in simple ways, and it sounds almost like, I know what this is about. But really, inherently, this is Hashem's Chokhmah. This is a Chokhmah that's higher than human understanding. We can know what it's about, but not fully comprehend the whole essence of it. This is Torah. So since we cannot fully comprehend the whole essence of it, how do we learn Torah? What is it? In what way do we learn Torah? This is the difference, again, between the Torah that we learn after Matan Torah and the Torah that was learned before Matan Torah. Before Matan Torah, as we said before, the Torah that we learned was limited to the extent that the human being is able to understand it. And this is why, at that time, not everyone could learn Torah. Only those who had the mind, who had the heart to learn. The Torah that we learn is learned in a totally different way. In principle, I'll give you the nutshell and then I'll explain it a little bit. The Torah that we learn is a Torah that is taught to us at the time when we learn by Hashem himself. It's Hashem who is feeding the Torah to us. Hashem is teaching us the Torah at the time when we learn. The Gemara says, that when one learns Koira, whether he learns Torah Shebiksav, or Shoina learns Mishnayos, or Torah Shebe'al Peh, which includes Chassidus and everything, Koira V'Shoina, HaKodesh Baruch Koira V'Shoina K'nagdoi. Hashem is sitting and learning with him.
Oh, but don't you think that's like a distant idea? That's like unattainable to become aware of such an idea that God is learning when you're learning?
That's my intent. I'll explain to you. You'll see that I'm not presenting you an unattainable idea. I'm going to explain to you something. What is the idea behind it? Like Innocent points out here, what are you trying to tell me? I should imagine that Hashem is learning with me. What does it mean? There are several levels in learning. The first level of learning is that what I learn, the way we approach it, what I learn makes sense to me. In other words, it's logical, it's presented in a rational and logical way. I can grasp the idea. The second level is that it seems to be correct. I have proofs. It seems to be a correct idea. And the third level is that this is something that I personally agree with. I can relate to it. Okay. This is basically the process of learning that when a person opens up a book.
Is it 3 levels? Sorry.
First, first you understand the logic. You grasp the idea. Then you judge and say it makes sense. I can rationalize it. And then the next stage he says, it seems right. I can agree with it. Whether it's true or not, in other words, agree or disagree is a separate stage. Like you can argue with a person and he can present his idea. And you can understand it very well but not agree with it. But you can see where he's coming from. And then there is the final stage where you say, I can find it in myself, I can agree with it. This is the normal process, how a person learns. This process is necessary when one is learning someone else's ideas. Somebody comes up to him and says, I want to say such and such. And you say, let me see if I agree with it. Right? So you start examining it from scratch. In Torah, there is the reverse approach. What did we say the last stage in learning is? Do I agree with it? What does it mean, do I agree with it? Does my seichel accept this idea? There is a higher inyan in knowledge. Torah presents a higher inyan in knowledge than even the inyan, do I agree with it? And that is that this is a truth, this is a godly truth. Hashem said it. So when one learns Torah, his approach is in the reverse. The first thing is, like we said before, and this is why I brought in the inyan that Hashem learns with him. The first thing is when he opens a Chumash, he opens a Gemara, he knows that this is Torah coming from Hashem. This is Hashem's word. And therefore, this inyan, whether this is something that he relates to, that he can accept, is there because he immediately knows that this is Hashem's word. The only thing that he needs to then relate to understand is to sense that this is Hashem's word. Then he already knows the end purpose of learning, not starting from scratch. He already absorbed the essence. This is what's called, in learning Torah, it is called the nasa. The nasa means we accept, we absorb it. Why do we absorb it? Because when somebody else is teaching me something, I may want to accept it or not. But if Hashem is teaching me something, then of course I want to accept it. Because Hashem is teaching it to me. So therefore there isn't that resistance, not something that you're learning from someone else. You're learning it directly from Hashem. So therefore you're immediately open to the truth of it. The only thing that you have to work on is that your seichel should also understand it. But the receiving it is there immediately. This is why Torah was received in this way of Na'aseh v'nishma. Na'aseh v'nishma means the first thing I know that this is Hashem's word. And therefore, I already learned that this is Hashem's word. Then I try to also bring my seichel to understand it. That's already after it becomes mine, after I already absorb it. What?
You have
Yeah.
This is the same which is discussed about this Hashem's Torah and this like Nasa, like what the Eden said after they go to Zan, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they were beaten down to nothing and they really accepted Hashem.
Right.
But then the first and after that it's like it also in corresponding to the regular learning. The last one is I agree with it. So by Torah it's like this. When you see that this God the truth, you better agree. So I agree. So you say I agree right away because what else? What's the question? I agree or not agree. Right? So over here, that.
Let me explain to you what that means before we learn Bereishis bara Elokim es hashamayim v'ha'aretz, which means that the Rebbe Hashem created the heavens and the earth. Okay. If you approach the heavens and the earth from your own experience, the first thing you say, okay, there is a heaven and the earth. Where is it coming from? And you start speculating where it's coming from. But the heaven and the earth are there as a reality. Where it's coming from is a speculation. Okay. When you learn Torah, totally different approach. When you learn Torah, you say, I have to understand what the world is, but where it's coming from, I have no problem. Okay, 1 second. To accept it that way, to know that that your mind accepts that which Hashem says, is only possible if you recognize that you are one with Hashem, that you are Hashem's nation. If you are a separate thing and you have to recognize Hashem, then you can't accept it that way.
That's my question.
Okay.
In Israel, they went through the goals.
Right.
Now, Baruch Hashem, it's not that bad. And by myself, I know that I have plenty of Yeshus with me. Like not like those people who were like, Hashem. They saw Hashem. That's it. There's nothing else. By me, I have plenty of other things. So how do I mean? He did not. Hashem did not forsake nothing just like that. He gave us probably the way to also to mevatel ourselves to Him, the way that it was in Mitzrayim, but not through God forbid such suffering.
The yeshus that you have, okay, which we all have to work in, like you said, is interfering only with trying to absorb and understand it. But the essence that we belong to Hashem and that we are a Jewish nation, and a Jewish nation by definition means Hashem's nation, that we have inherently. In terms of the whole yeshus, you'll never question, if I'm a yesh, maybe if I have more covered outside of the Jewish nation, maybe I'll go there. There's no such thing doesn't exist. In other words, it's not a question of personal gain through the yeshus. The yeshus is something which interferes with your seichel, but it doesn't interfere with who you are.
But it's coming to revelation, not on a daily basis. This field is saying we never will go to any other nation. You're right, I agree with you. But we're saying but it's not. If I would know this every single second, then sure, no question about it. But I don't know about it.
You don't know about it consciously because you're not confronted with it.
Right, for sure.
Okay, but essentially, that's what I'm saying to you. Whenever we are challenged, whenever we have a difficulty, we have to remember the principle that brought us to tshuva. But the principle when we came out of Mitzrayim. It says in Tanakh, because throughout Jewish history, after Matan Torah, the Eden fell down to the Egel, and then throughout Jewish history there were all kinds of ups and downs. Okay, and then we also say this pasuk in Davening Rosh Hashanah, Zocharti lo chesed mi'orayach ahavas k'lo yisoyach. Lech techa achere b'midbar. Hashem says, I remember in your youth when you first woke up from Mitzrayim, you came after me to the Midbar. What is that? But afterwards I fell down and I sinned. Because this initial, afterwards there were nisyonis, but the initial connection, the initial bond is there. And we always have to know that we have this initial bond. And we have to also learn to use it practically when in learning. The first thing when you sit down to learn Torah, you sit down to learn Torah not with your own judgment. The first thing you have to know that this is something which Hashem is teaching you. This is the approach to learning Torah. Whether you understand that Hashem is sitting and learning with you or not, but this is the meaning from Torah. Torah is a chokhmah from the Meibushin that was given to us, not something that we discovered, not something that we created. And this is the power of Torah, that because it's something that was given to us, every word of Torah that we learn gives us chayas, gives us life. Every word of Torah that we learn touches our souls and gives us life, even whether we understand it or not. Provided that we recognize that this is a word of Torah that comes from Hashem. So, in conclusion, what I want to bring out, we have to cut short today, is, again, this is something which I spoke a long time ago, many months ago. The principle that we have to come to, the principle that we have to relate to, is that every individual belongs here, meaning in Yiddishkeit. He is not a stranger, and his belonging here is not dependent on how much he knows. Just like Eden, when they came out of Mitzrayim, they knew nothing. But at that moment, they became Hashem's nation. And every individual, Id, is a member of Hashem's nation. This is a principle that we have to ingrain ourselves. This is a principle that we have to actually live down, so to speak, digest and ingrain into our minds. We are not what we were before. We are not outside of Yiddishkeit. We are like in the whole world. In the world, every individual is a separate entity. And I'm learning something with my seichel. No. I'm not a separate entity. I belong to a nation. And this nation belongs to Hashem. And from then on, I can start learning Aleph Beis and Ivre and Trop and Dikduk, whatever it is. But everything that I learn, I'm learning as an insider, not as an outsider. Then the learning has a tremendous effect on the person. It's like Torah is called food. It's like taking food. A person takes a morsel of food and eats it and digests it. Even if he doesn't understand he doesn't know what it's made of, he gives him chayes. And we once discussed over here, I remember, that food has a very special quality in that, let's say a person is very, very hungry. The minute he tastes the food, the pang of hunger releases. Not only after he eats his fill, even the minute he tastes the food, immediately he feels already relieved. So, Now let's go to the chasana. Right? Is that you hold on to the chasana? Okay, let me just go.